Hi, this is Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dereck Leonard Faulkner. Dereck is a former professional football player. He obtained his PhD in management from Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University. Today, we will discuss Dereck's PhD research on unveiling the power of support, how leadership, vision, and mentorship drive success in the National Football League. It's a pleasure to have you on my show, Dereck.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, David. I appreciate it. It's been a whirlwind. Just approaching closer to graduation in May, so a few weeks ahead and or a few weeks away, and just this has been a great journey.
Dereck, you are a former professional football player. Please share with us a little bit about your football career.
Yeah. So my football career spawns back to high school. I was a standout basketball player throughout my entire youth. I started playing football super late. Well, in football terms, very late. I didn't start playing until almost 11th grade. My godfather was one of the Philadelphia Eagles' all-time leading receivers, Mike Quick. So him, my father, and I, spent a lot of time together growing up playing golf. And my father would always try to convince me to play. My dad was an All-American in high school and a Hall of Famer at Virginia State University, a D2 school, back in the 70s. And he would constantly kind of beg me to play. I never wanted to do it. And then finally I gave in to him and my best friend from high school's wishes, who was also one of the top running backs in the state of New Jersey at that time, and walked out there, and it changed the entire trajectory and course of my life. I went from getting recruited by like mid-major basketball programs like Richmond and Hofstra, and then it changed. I started playing football. I was getting recruited by every Big Ten program in the country, and from SEC and ACC schools. So it just changed. I became the number one receiver in New Jersey. By the time I was 2 years later, by the time I was a senior, concluding my senior year, I went on to Hampton University. By influence of my mom, and my mom really influenced me going to Hampton. I think more so for the academics,
Mhm.
and I think I needed a little bit more of an academic push, I guess, at that time. And but Hampton at that time had been putting some guys in the NFL.
Mhm.
I remember there was a player. I ended up wearing his number. He ended up getting drafted by the Giants, I believe, in the sixth round. So
Mhm.
I'm a senior in high school, and I'm like, okay, well, I see they are putting some guys in the NFL. So my mom was like, see, guys are going to NFL from here, so you should be able to, it'll be a good transition. And so I decided to forego some of the bigger schools like Iowa, Minnesota, West Virginia, who had made offers, and I decided to go to Hampton.
Mhm.
And kind of started the career in a sense of like being able to balance football and academics. I kind
Mhm.
of went into that opportunity thinking, okay, I get to hit the reset button with school. I was kind of a so-so student in high school, kind of just did everything to get by. And then, I kind of hit the reset button, was able to kind of start and forge a, successful career. We won 3 Black national championships. We went undefeated my junior year. So we were a winning program. I think we had 13 of us went to the NFL out of our group. So high group of talent, a bunch of NFL, players came through that particular era. So it worked out. And I was able to, really concentrate in school. And was I ended up, going into the School of Management there, and was in the business school at Hampton. So it all kind of worked out. But I definitely sometimes think about like, man, what if I had just, went to some of the bigger programs like I'm,
Mhm.
slated to? What would have
Mhm.
happened? I don't know.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
always interesting.
yeah. And obviously, you have very successful college football career. And then you went on to do a PhD in management at Case
Mhm.
Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management.
Mhm.
Uh, that's a huge leap,
Yeah.
from career football and taking this academic
Mhm.
approach.
Mhm.
Why were you interested in pursuing a PhD?
I think for me, I'm a very curious person. Curiosity is something that I've always been, something that I've always looked at kind of looking to self-develop. I bring on that same type of mentality, even in sports, right? So, I would go into the season and say, hey, I ran this fast, so I need to run faster this next season. Or I caught 50 passes this year, I want to catch 75. So I think that's ultimately the curiosity, a
Mm,
level of
mm,
competitiveness.
mhm,
I was looking at, we were in the middle of COVID,
mm,
and I was working with my consulting business, and we were moving a lot of. I had just started a med device portion of my business, sector of my business, where I was in like the PPE space. I was selling COVID tests and gloves and masks, and I was,
mm,
working with a bunch of clients all
yeah.
throughout the NBA and NFL, and I don't know. I was just sitting in the computer. I'm like, what if I went and got a DBA and started looking
Mm,
up
mm,
DBAs and then looking up programs, and I saw
mm,
some programs, and then I was like, well, I've learned my lesson, right? If you
mm,
don't know,
yeah.
then it's best to like ask someone or
Yeah.
reach out to somebody senior to kind of give you some guidance steps. So I reached
Mm,
out to one of my advisors from GW. He actually was good friends with Richard Boyacic, um, who ended up being my advisor and chair, and he connected us. So,
wonderful.
Dr. James Bailey at GW connected me with Richard. Him and Richard and I hit it off pretty well early on. Richard, is really, intense and passionate guy. So
Mm.
said, I think you'll be great. And then I still didn't believe it. And to the point, and I honestly, no fault to Case. I
Yeah.
truly know Case now
Mm,
in and out. I know the entire
mm,
fabric of Case, but up until that
mm,
point, I really didn't know
mm,
a ton about Case Western. I
mm,
didn't know a ton about Weatherhead.
mm,
Um, I just knew, I got introduced, and then I, ran into uh Cali
mm,
and had interviews with
mm,
Phil Cola.
mm.
And they're kind of giving me the spill, but they're not telling me like how intense the program is. I just wasn't fully Cali, I always joke with Cali now. We joke about it all the time. We were in Finland, we joked. I was like, he looked at me and said, hey, Dereck, this program's gonna be about, 40 hours a week. And I'm
Mm,
like, a week, this is how much time you're gonna put into this program over the next 3 to 4 years. And I'm sitting in my office on Zoom and I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I juggle things all the time. I got a nonprofit, I have this business, I make
yeah.
custom suits, I work with the league, I'm a union rep. I could
Yeah.
juggle it. Totally humbling, humbled me to the. I'm still humbled to this day. I'm like, we graduate in a few months, and I'm like, I don't know how I got through all of this, but
Yeah.
it was. I think to answer your question though, I think I was curious. I felt like what can ultimately separate me amongst
Mm,
a
mm,
lot of my peers within the
mm,
sports realm.
mm, mm,
I'm
mm,
around a ton of executives
mm,
in our
mm,
union, within
mm,
league front office, within
mm,
individual teams. And
mm,
I generally felt like,
mm.
hey, you got an MBA, that's
Yeah.
one tool in the toolbox. What more can you add? And I think that this just unlocked a ton of other tools that I did
Yeah.
not know I had until I
Yeah.
got the case.
Yeah. For your PhD in designing sustainable systems, you studied how leadership, vision, and mentorship drive success in the National Football League. Please share why
Mhm.
you want to study this research topic.
Well, I think the ultimate essence of it,
Mm,
football, sports, business are kind of etched in my fabric. So
mm,
I have common interests in it, right? And I think that ultimately, I think the first mistake a lot of PhD students make is they start dialing into subjects that they're not relatively passionate about,
mm,
or they don't have a connection with.
mm,
I generally haven't had this connection of sports, business, relatively my entire life. So it
mm,
kind of worked its way into my academic career. But how I looked into leadership, one, I was really curious about, how certain leaders stayed successful in
mm,
sports, right? We
mm,
have,
mm,
perennial winners, but then we have perennial successful leaders as well. They
mm,
always seem to produce
mm,
great, results, and not only just wins and losses, but also within, players and how
mm,
they result and how
mm,
they ultimately impact
mm,
those their people. So I was interested in that. I think initially as a former player as well, I've had good and bad coaches. I've had
Mm,
good and bad leaders. I've had people that I leaned into and I walked away and I was like, man, this guy
mm,
was pretty poor.
mm,
And it impacted me to never want to be like that
mm,
or to, replicate that. But then I've also had really strong positive leadership and
mm,
it's ultimately helped me become better, right?
mm,
And it's ultimately helped me be able to lead teams myself. Maybe not within a locker room, right? I don't want to give the Vince Lombardi rah-rah speeches. That's not really my thing, but I definitely know what it takes to kind of impact a group or a
mm,
room. I think
mm,
the same speech, the same way you can impact a boardroom is the same way
mm,
you can impact a group of football players. It's
mm,
just a different, it's just different cadences and
mm,
different conversational pieces. But
mm,
ultimately, everybody has one general, thing that they want to accomplish, and that's winning.
mm,
We all want to
mm,
win, right? You want to
mm,
have a successful business or a
mm,
successful podcast
mm,
or, a successful team. And I think we all generally want to win or we want to be successful. So I think I think my research not only just talked about leadership and quality leadership and effective leadership, but also kind of generally built around like
mm,
winning and creating winning environments and making
mm,
people feel good and
mm,
want to be a part of your organization to want to win, right?
mhm.
Football is really tough because as a coach or a leader, you have 150 to 100 different individuals you're trying to get onto
Mm,
one page
mm,
to follow one protocol
mm,
that will ultimately look to, reach one singular goal. And then you have to have 11 men on the field all moving in sync
mm,
in synchrony, being able to connect together and be able to move the ball up the field or accomplish a certain goal. So
mhm,
leadership is really crucial in
mhm,
NFL. Honestly, to
mhm,
be able to get all of these
mhm.
different moving pieces
Yeah.
to move as one, it's really important.
To study your research topic, what was your research methodological approach?
So we took on three different methods within our approach. So initially, we started off with a qualitative method
Mm,
approach where we interviewed
mm,
33 executives and head coaches
mhm,
throughout the league. So started at the very, very top of the apex, interviewed maybe four team owners, and then worked our way down to team presidents and executive directors and then some head coaches. So I was really blessed to be able
mm,
to even have the access to that type of data or
mhm,
persons.
mhm,
I really, attribute that to my time in the NFL and just spending time around the league and time around, I guess, not pissing enough people off where they at least take my phone calls, right? So, uh, I
Connection
cold
matters
call.
for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Connections matter. So I was able to connect with some of my old team executives that I played for, and then some that I, had, connected with, and some I never met, but some were actually, familiar with Case and they were familiar with Weatherhead. So that worked in my favor. But worked in that space. We were able to interview and get qualitative data from those three
Mm,
executives, and then
mm,
we did two other
mm,
studies, which
mm,
were quantitative studies, and I
mm,
actually did a reverse engineered
mm.
it, and I actually surveyed over 400 former
Wow.
players like myself. So was able to to survey those former players. We used constructs
Mhm,
like personal vision and engagement, work engagement, and career satisfaction tools
mhm,
to kind of see how players
mm,
feel about their post careers and how they
mm,
felt about working for these organizations in the NFL. So you
mhm,
had one side looking to
mhm,
see, okay, you have where how am I a positive leader or am I an effective
mm,
leader for my people? And then you actually got some data from the actual players that kind of mention like, hey, I had great leadership here, or I felt like the league I didn't transition as well, or things didn't go into my favor, or whatever it may be.
mm,
And we had good and bad,
mm,
I think positive and negative
mm,
reactions in that space. So it, it,
mm,
it was I can even speak for myself. I felt like, my transition wasn't as flawless as it could have been.
right.
So it kind of connected into the two. I think the other part, in regards to the research on the quantitative side, the mentorship. I think mentorship plays a really, really critical role in the NFL and in sports. We have players that have, key and strong mentors throughout. Their transition is a lot more,
Mm,
flawless, and it actually, it evolves a little bit better. So we did discover that. We saw that we were able to get some open-ended data from the players, and you started to see
mm,
a repetitive name or
mm,
group of names that continuously came up that were
mm,
being mentioned as great mentors. So that
mm,
also showed, and some of
mm,
those mentors that were mentioned
mm.
were actually some that names that I actually interviewed or were
Wow.
under that network of under that quote unquote
Mm,
coaching tree.
yeah.
So you clearly can see there's a connectivity there, right?
Mm,
Quality leadership
mm,
ultimately impacts the people, which
mm,
then they ultimately just runs in a
mm,
360 where it reconnects and they
mm.
hire within their circle because they're constantly teaching and helping them become effective leaders for later. So it works.
Yeah. Derek, I'm really super amazed with the data quality you have access to this the management, the coaches, and the players.
Yes.
Amazing. As you mentioned, many NFL executives, coaches, and former players participated in your research. Tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about these three groups of research participants.
The three groups.
Yeah, please.
So within the three groups,
Mm,
I wanted to look into active players, excuse me, active executives in
mm,
leadership. So I thought that there would be, a strong data set if I actually worked with executives that were actually still working in the space. Um, we looked at, the criteria. They had to have at least 10 years of experience. They had to, we looked at winning percentages and success rates, that sort of thing. I wanted to open it up to, diverse. I wanted to have a diverse group. So we, were able to, uh, you know, interview like four executive females within the
mm,
league. So that was great. Some were even at level of ownership. So that was a good thing. We looked at, um, coaches, not only head coaches, but also defense and offensive coordinators, because they're ultimately they're like sub leadership within the locker room. Meaning, like in the football, we call it they have their own room, and having your own room is like as the offensive defensive coordinator. So you have the head coach, but then the offense and defense separates, and you still working. You're like almost like a VP in a sense, right? You got your,
mhm,
you got a CEO, but then you're also like VP, senior director kind of thing. So
mm,
organizations are ran that space, and then we had on the opposite end with the former players. These were all retired players or players that had played at least one year,
mhm,
1 to 20 years, and
mm,
wanted to see what that progression looked like on within their transition. Wanted to see how a player um, within that 400 or so, how they transitioned post career and what they thought about their careers and how they felt about their selves as professional athletes or post professional athletes. Um, Looked at like were they married, age demographics,
mm,
obviously race.
mhm.
Looked at position as well. I think that was
Yeah,
something late we added.
yeah.
We wanted to see the definition of how a player that may have played quarterback transitions versus a player or a linebacker or a running
Mm,
back. I think quarterback obviously showed a lot more promise within
mm,
transition because they're
mm,
already forced into a leadership role
mm,
early on, right? They're
mm,
always looked as upon as a leader,
mm,
even early on as a high school or college player. Coming to the league, you're always looked at as a player, as a leader within that locker room, and you're also one of the higher paid. So you're
mm.
going to leave the
Yeah.
league probably a little happier because you made more money. So
More
it
expectations also to probably.
more expectations. It kind of, but then you spin into different spaces that we didn't really dial into, and we kind of stayed
Yeah,
outside of like the race component. But
yeah.
in the quarterback room, in the quarterback position, it's predominantly a Caucasian white
Mm,
player position. The gap is starting to close a lot more
mm,
within black and brown in that space, but
mm,
that's also plays a dynamic because there's other positions that are more
mm,
heavily black and brown,
mm,
and those positions or those particular players are finding themselves struggling a little bit more to
mm,
transition.
mm,
Maybe not feeling the same support or not
mm,
having the same access.
mm,
So there's tons of different nuances within this research. I feel like I can do like 6 or 7 different studies within the research. Everyone tells me that. I was more so just limping, trying to get out. I was just trying to not get out of it, but I'm just like, I'm trying to get through. I'm
Yeah,
like, can I just focus on these two? But it was a lot. It definitely was a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, for sure. So for your project, you conducted 3 studies. What did you learn
Mhm.
from these 3 studies?
Um, So the obvious, a lot of the executives really think they're celebrities. They think they're bigger than the players. So,
Mm,
they feel like they're just as important, which they are. You have
for sure.
billionaire owners and,
Yeah,
some of them, some of the best business minds in
yeah.
sports. So they have their own level of ego, right?
Hmm.
I thought, but I've done also, but on a serious note, I did see that the one thing I saw that was the biggest differentiate between the players and the executives. The executives are constantly looking to get better. They're
Mm,
constantly resharpening and refining their
mm,
tools. They're
mm,
constantly looking
mm,
to become
mm,
as well read as they can to
mm,
constantly, build and create
mm,
opportunity for themselves to be better leaders.
mm.
I think players find themselves almost in a level of they can fall into almost some stagnant way of thinking and way of development because it's like, hey, I've made it to the highest level, right?
Yeah.
I'm a first round pick. I'm drafted. There's nothing else I really need to do other than just be the best quarterback or running back I can be, right?
Mm, mm,
Thinking about how I want to develop outside of that is not really my thing. I'm just really just trying to play 10 years or however long, and that's it. And meanwhile, their counterparts every offseason are going to different, conferences or reading different materials or
mm.
writing or learning. And the gap is getting wider and wider because now you're technically going into a gunfight with a knife and someone has a gun. So it's like you're not speaking the same language, you're not
Yeah.
moving at the same pace.
Hmm.
And I think for players, what I found in this entire study between those two groups, the players have to really focus on trying to become better and
Mm,
consistently sharpen their
mm,
tools so they can
mm,
make better decisions post
mm,
career. They can make
mm,
better decisions as union reps. They can make
mm,
better decisions
mm,
as running their own quote unquote entities
mm.
and corporations. Because at the end of the day, every player is their own INC, right? Every
Yeah.
player I look at it, Dereck Faulkner Incorporated, and I'm the CEO, and everyone else around me
Yeah.
are one's my operating officer,
Mm,
one's my financial officer, and I have to be able to tell these folks what to do. Now, if I'm not
mm,
as sharp as I need to be, then
mm,
how can I be able to run my own, make decisions for my own organization, right?
mhm.
So
Yeah.
if I'm not making decisions for my own organization, then I'm probably making poor ones, which then leads me down another level of whatever post career. That's
Mm,
where you find guys finding themselves in financial trouble or business trouble
mm.
or just lack of like finding what their passion is because they never had to do it. So found a lot of those things too.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some practical applications of your research? You develop this leadership framework.
Mm-hmm. I think some practical frameworks. I think one of the practical components for this is really helping the league develop some support systems for the players, right?
Mm,
Putting better
mm,
policy in
mm.
for players to be able to have more peer mentorship,
Yeah.
players being able to connect with former players, active
Mm,
and former players connecting
mm,
together. I think is really important. I think also creating opportunity there's more dialogue amongst the front office or ownership and leadership and the players. The
mm,
players and they're actually talking and listening to one another, right? So many times players are coming back and saying, "Hey, I don't like the locker room, or I don't like the team bus, or I don't like the team plane, and there's not good food, snacks in the locker room, that sort of thing." That's
yeah.
fine, but I think, and then the ownership is saying, "Hey, do this. We're not, we don't want to, lower, we don't want the higher salary cap or whatever it
Mm,
may be that the
mm,
owners go through.
yeah.
Our payroll is this high. I think it's just got to be more dialogue between the two to become more
Mm,
homogeneous and connected and more
mm,
connectivity.
mm,
Um, I would say that in this particular climate, ownership leaders are becoming more mindful of how they're
mm,
leading. I think
Mm,
the old way of how they did things, where
mm,
it was like shut up and play, or
mm,
just be
mm,
happy you're paying,
mm,
and treated
mm,
players a certain way. That you can't do that anymore.
mm,
Not with this new level. Not with
yeah.
this new athlete.
Mm,
I would
yeah.
say the one thing we could say about this is this new Gen Z athlete. They're willing to speak out. They're willing to put their foot down.
Yeah.
They may speak out a little bit out of turn,
Yeah.
and not it
Yeah.
may not be fully. They may
Yeah.
not fully know everything they're talking about,
Yeah.
but they are weak. They at least have the courage to
Yeah.
stand up and say, "Hey, I don't like this.
Mm,
I want something to change."
mm,
I think that's a lot different from
yeah.
my generation. We were still under the we were still under that same thought process of like,
Mm,
don't want to rock the boat. Let's
mm,
just like fight through it, muscle through it.
yeah.
Where now this younger generation, this younger athlete are willing and looking to have conversations with ownership. I talk to
Yeah.
younger players and they're like, yeah, I talked to the owner. I have his phone number.
Yeah.
My in my era, you would have never had the team president or the general manager's phone number unless you were
Yeah.
like a top tier guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just I think those where the communication and the
Yeah.
connectivity has to be has definitely changed over time, and
Yeah.
I think that's for the good.
Yeah. Do you think that connectivity changed because of presence of social media? A lot of players have followers and they are very active in social media and they're speaking their mind openly and without any fear, or something else happened in this relationship?
Definitely the access.
Yeah.
I think the social access and the platforming and the
Yeah.
audience has grown. So a player has an audience, he can get on his
Yeah.
podcast and
Yeah.
talk, and but
Yeah.
it can be a positive and a negative, right?
Mm,
Um, I think yes, as quickly as you're able to call out your
mm,
team, your
mm,
owner, or call out
mm,
your coach for whatever on your podcast,
mm,
you still can in reverse. Now you have an audience
mm,
that's criticizing you for dropping the game winning pass
mm.
in week 13, and you have to be able to deal with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the other part. It's like it's it's a two-headed sword, right? It's
Mm,
you have to be able to accept both if you're looking to do
mm,
that. One thing I
mm,
don't really agree with when it comes to the players,
mm,
in regards to the social component,
mm,
I think there's still a level. There has to be a level of professionalism
mm,
and how you run your business and how things are done. I think that social media has definitely expanded the game,
mm.
but I think players run into a podcast after a win or loss after a game. I don't really think that's always positive because you wouldn't want your general manager running to a podcast saying like, "Yeah, we might cut this guy tomorrow. Yeah, we I didn't like the way Dereck hasn't been producing the last 3 weeks. He may be out of here." That would cause an entire uproar if the general manager of the Falcons
Mm,
did that and said, "I don't like the way Dereck Faulkner's been playing. It's poor. He's got
mm.
2 more weeks and he's on the chopping block." That would just cause an entire uproar. So
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a balance.
Yeah.
But I think that yes, the game has totally changed.
Mm,
I had a coach kind of mention to me, and it's again just shows me how I think the coaches are and executives are trying to make a conscious effort because it's in
mm,
their face. He
mm,
mentioned like, coaching a kid that may have missed the game winning tackle, and now it just went viral on Twitter and IG, and it's getting reposted. This him whipping
mm,
on a tackle and missing.
mm,
I have to figure out how to be a better leader to keep him engaged the next
mm.
week because we have to win. We have to play next another week.
Yeah.
And now this kid's 24 years old. His head's in the dumps.
Mm,
He can't really deal with this
yeah.
level of scrutiny.
Yeah.
It's on the NFL. It's on
Yeah.
ESPN top 10
Yeah.
plays.
Yeah.
It's getting posted all over Twitter and it's getting
Yeah.
reposted. He's getting mentioned
Yeah.
nonstop. It's
Yeah.
people are laughing,
Yeah.
joking. Uh,
Yeah.
this the betting and all of this stuff. And people are like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
screwed up my parlay." All
Yeah.
this the nonsense we hear, right?
Yeah.
That can
Yeah.
weigh heavily on a
Yeah.
player.
Yeah.
So I think it's great that I hear executives talking about being mindful, having
Yeah.
mindfulness
Mm,
leadership, um, acting with empathy in the
mm,
spaces. You have to be empathetic in this
yeah.
space
Yeah.
because of those are things that,
Yeah.
players in the 70s and the 80s and the
Yeah.
90s never dealt with,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah. Just focus on
you
the
miss
game.
you just focus on the game. If you miss the
Yeah.
tackle,
Yeah.
you might have
Yeah.
screwed up and
Yeah.
caused the team to
Yeah.
lose, but
Yeah.
they'd be pissed off. The local
Yeah.
media will kill you for a little bit and they'll forget
Yeah.
about it and move on.
Yeah. But
There's plays
yeah.
that get reran for
Yeah.
2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
depending on how bad it is,
Yeah.
So that can
Yes.
really affect the player.
Yeah, it's a lot of distraction for sure.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Derek, I want to ask you, doing a PhD uh, was not easy. How was your experience doing a PhD overall?
Experience is great. But I really generally give a lot of kudos to my cohort and who
Mm,
I actually I was in the trenches with every day. I think that really amplifies and excels your experience depending on who you're
mm,
alongside with.
mm.
Because we're all going through it. We're all trying to get the assignments done, and we all know how intense case can be.
Yeah.
And as intense, uh, some of the great minds and professors in this program, they expect a lot.
Mhm,
So I would say there's no cutting any corners with
mhm,
case. So you're gonna have to go through a gauntlet, but I think having support from your cohort members, and then also having great access to the professors and to the advisors, I think that was excel.
mm,
It was second to none.
mm,
Being able to it was never a time I couldn't get Richard on a call to sit down and talk to me. It's never a time I couldn't get Callie to respond to an email, right? And he's moving all over the place all the
yeah.
time, right? So
Yeah.
but there was so many great, people. I mean, Sherry and Heather Groans, all these different folks that were students, and now they started to come into an advisory role or work as adjuncts. I mean, they were awesome. But then there were some great minds in regards to the professors that, you know, outside of the research were just some of our coursework. Some really great conversations.
Mhm,
Really, they were just as interested in some of the things I was able to
mm,
share with them about sports
mm,
and sports business. They never heard it before. This is like the first time they actually had someone that's been in sports business that was inside of it that I can kind of
mm.
give my insights that were connecting to some of the readings or some of the things that we had going that we were discussing that particular day. So it was good.
Yeah. Great. How has your PhD training helped you in your professional development?
Well, it's definitely helped me. It's unlocked my ears and eyes and how I see things and analyze. And I'm always looking at things differently now and like, oh, that could be a great research topic. Or now when someone says something to me, I'm like, all right, let's fact check that first, right? Where cite your source. That's my new saying now, right? That's my new saying. I said that to a couple of my teammates. We have a group chat with my college team. It's like 30 or 40 guys in this group chat. It's all the guys that played in my era that we were winning together. And guys in there, they argue about the craziest things, whether it's LeBron and Jordan or this and that and this. And my thing now is like, cite your source. Where'd you get that from? And they're like, so cite your source. So I think
Yeah.
that's what really unlocked for me is,
Yeah.
being able to I
Mm,
find myself researching things more now, like just
yeah.
going and looking and
Yeah.
discovering. So
Mm,
before it was just like curiosity. Now
mm,
it's like I literally in the discovery mode. I like
mm,
to find different
mm,
things and then be able to
mm,
like,
mm,
peel back layers. I think
mm,
that's really important.
mm. You mentioned that your project have so many venues, so many research you could have done. Obviously, in PhD, we can't do all the topics for sure.
Right.
So, what is your advice for future research on this topic?
I think some of the future research for this particular topic, I think we should definitely look into like the salary and the pay
Mm,
wage gap. I think that's really important to look into what that will look like.
mm,
Um, I think looking more into like obviously the duration of time. I think there's a definite gap in the midst of players that only played 1, 2, or 3 years, how quickly they have to look into their transition versus players that played 6, 7, 10 years.
mm,
Those ultimately those players have a tougher time transitioning than the shorter frame guys. Now, how you will look at it from two different lanes, you'll say, well, the guy that played 1 or 2 years didn't really make
mm,
as much money as the guy that played 10, but the
mm,
guy that played 10 is struggling far more
mm,
transitioning and has
mm,
far more pitfalls post
mm,
career than the guy that played 1 or 2. Why? The
mm,
1 or 2, he had to get right into his transition quickly and he had to figure it
mm,
out, right? The
mm,
guy that played 10 years went 10 years just playing and just being a safety in the National Football League. Never
Mm,
really had to really think about what was going to be the next steps. The dichotomy within that space, the 10-year player gets access to more of the resources that the
mm,
NFL can provide versus the guy that played 1 or 2 seasons.
mm,
So it's like the one group needs the resources right now. They don't have as much access. Not They have access to the resources, but not as much
mm,
because of the NFL is built upon like how long you played, how much money you put into the union and pay dues and all these different things, which is totally understandable within any organization, right? How long is your
mm,
pension? All of these different things are benefits. Now, whether
mhm,
you working at Google or you're working for the NFL, the benefits are the benefits.
mhm,
But we are finding that to be a real kind of like disconnect because players need the support and resources. Some of them need them right now, right? They need it right now. And I say right now, meaning like the guys that are 1 or 2 years made a little bit of money that can kind of sustain you for a little while. And then I need to get to work. I need to figure out what's the next step.
mhm,
Versus the guy that's been playing 10 years in the NFL, you should have made substantial, at least 7 figures or something in the space, right? Something.
mm,
Even if you were a 52nd guy on the roster, you made at least enough money to be able
mm,
to have a cushion if
yeah,
you were managing your funds right.
yeah,
Those guys are having trouble because they'll have a bunch of money or have some money, don't really know how to manage it or what to do with it.
mm,
And they're 10 to 15 years away from actual academics in college and
mm,
school and
mm,
transition working and understanding. So a guy that's been away from college for 10 years is gonna be
mm,
a really tough to get him to get back into school.
yeah,
Like it'll be tough, right? It was tough for me even coming back from George Washington 10 years ago to then
yeah,
get into this program in 21. It was like I had to like literally hit a switch.
mm,
And it took
mm,
maybe a month or two to like get into the
mm,
realm of even how I was approaching
mm,
the work, how
yeah,
I was writing.
yeah,
I was like, Heather and Phil used to get on me so much in the early stages of how I was writing because I had been working in the nonprofit space,
mm,
and my writing in the nonprofit space is like all of like passionate begging for money and give me this and donate and I have this idea and
academic, academic writing.
you can't articulate yourself in academic writing like that. That's not PhD. That's not how we do here. And I'm like, I'm so confused. Like, what do you mean? And it's like, this is no, that's not it. So you have to, you have
Yeah,
to be able to. It's a format in how you present an
yeah,
argument, and then
yeah,
there needs to be literature but backing it, and then you need to give reasons why, and then
yeah,
be able to give a. It's Whereas like I'm in a nonprofit space and I'm just begging for money and asking for help. So it was like a switch that had to get turned. And
for
then
sure.
as the process went on, it just began to
Yeah.
change. And then
Mm,
so now I see like
mm,
not that
mm,
it was like a total like reconstruct, but it was definitely a change of
mm,
mindset, I would say,
mm,
for sure.
mm. What is next for you, Derek?
Hopefully a ton of things, right? I have more time now to kind of like begin to work on my individual projects.
Mm,
My nonprofit, I can kind of get back into space.
mm,
I'm working currently with a law firm. Working with them in some of the player benefits and space and concussion space on that side. I want to. My ultimate goal, I would love to, get an opportunity to work in the front office under, upper management with the team. I would
mm,
love to get that opportunity to be either in the strategy side
mm,
or operations side in the C-suite with a team working directly with ownership and the board. Um, I would like to bring, I think, a twofold look into that in that space, meaning I would have player experience, but I don't want to be in the locker room. I don't want to make decisions on hiring and firing the players, but I would love to help in regards to the strategy and the revenue of the business, but then also give insights on how to be able to main, retain our guys and make sure that the players are fully satisfied and that they're working together with the organization in conjunction and under the same roof and the same
mm.
pathway.
Mm,
I want to get, want to ultimately, publish some papers, publish some studies,
mm,
write some books like Richard, and then get on the speaking circuit at some
mm,
point,
mm,
and to really tell my story. Not
mm,
only just my personal story, but I also talk about, the research,
mm,
and what I and how, sports leadership and sports and, sports business, it's I think that we all can kind of gather from, business can we can gain insights from sports outside of just scoring touchdowns or, hitting a winning jump shot. I think there's so much that's built into sports that, so many executives and leaders could pull from. I think, from military or from, different segments of business. I think there's because again, it goes back to I always talk about this. It's one thing that people want to do, whether you're selling oranges on the sidewalk or you're, running, mayor's office or whatever. Everybody wants to win.
mm,
Everybody wants to figure
mm,
out the solution to win. They want to figure out what are winning solutions and how can
mm,
we do it, and then how can we replicate it and do it again and again and again. What's the winning formula? And the one thing about sports, they're constantly creating new formulas of winning, right? And creating winning environments. So I think that's where I want to, help organizations figure out the best possible way to win
mm.
and be successful.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your interesting research and story with us, Dereck. I wish you all the best.
No, I appreciate it, David, and thank you again. I appreciate your time.